Okay, hi everybody. I'd like to welcome you to a reading sponsored by the Normandale Community College AFA and Creative Writing Program and the Normandale Reading Series. Tonight's reading will feature poets from the anthology Rocked by the Waters, Poems of Motherhood, which I'm very grateful to also be included in. And I'm going to hand it over to our host, one of the co-editors. The co-editors actually are both here tonight, Margaret, Hasse, and Athena Kildegard. Margaret's going to be the MC for the evening, so I'm going to hand it over to Margaret. Let me unmute you, and there you go.
Oh, Kris, thank you so much for being the host of this event and reaching out to us. The book is very new, just a couple of months ago, and of course the live readings had to be canceled, but of course this is live, just a different kind of liveness. We're really happy to have whomever is out there listening to us, and I'm especially happy to have these 9 poets from the book. We have a book of poetry with more than 130 poems in it, and it is a rich book. If I do say so myself, and I do, I love each and every one of these poems. With Athena Kildegard, we read and handpicked these and love them for each of the poems for its power, but also a range of types of experiences of mothering. All of the women in the book are mother poets. They all are contemporary American poets. And you're about to meet 9 of them. Well, you've just met Kris. You'll meet her again when she reads her own poem. And the book is published by Noden Press, Norton Stillman publisher, and we'll tell you more about the book later. But our very first reader tonight is Lesley Wheeler. Lesley Wheeler has a brand new collection of poems herself called The State She's In, from Tinderbox Editions. She also has a first novel out this summer called Unbecoming. She lives in Virginia, and she is poetry editor of Shenandoah. Welcome, Lesley Wheeler.
Thank you, Margaret. Thank you, Athena. I just want to say that you're right. This is a really beautiful book full of really gorgeous and moving and very different poems. And I feel so honored to be in it, and I'm so happy to be participating tonight. I know we're all isolated, but this comradeship means a lot to me. So I'm going to read 2 poems. I'm going to read my own in the book, and I'm going to read a poem by somebody else. I'll start with my own so that the wonderful poet I chose for the second one doesn't upstage me. It's called Cells All Ringing. The 14-year-old daughter I describe in this poem is 23 now and teaching in Philadelphia. Cells All Ringing. It was not the sick shudder of a small plane, windshield scratched, scenery blurred, or the snarl of a finger sliding beneath an envelope flap. It was more like waking up after a doze on a plastic raft, noticing the shore is far off and the sky plumb. Not terrifying yet, just enough time to paddle in, pack up blankets and slowly rusting chairs, children who are no longer small. Or it was like not hearing a toddler babble about toy sharks behind a half-closed door, realizing you've been not hearing her for a few minutes now. She suddenly became 14 and it's dinner, and she's describing the pregnant girl in Earth Science as she doesn't eat her page of cod, scribbled with herbs and strips of wine-poached pepper. I sort of admire her, she says. She's getting really fat now. You correct her, unwarily. Not fat. A 7-month belly is hard and full of baby. And then rising tones behind her fully closed door. Daughter and friend emerge to ask, how far along until you start to show? It turns out to be another teenager, not your sensible girl whose slender left hip buzzes with texts until stars vibrate in a perfectly dry night sky like messages, like fish in deep water, or the unnecessarily frightened passengers on a small plane about to land. A shell's secretive murmur reminds you of the sea, but is really your own blood echoing through nearby coils. Sound reflected, not by a mirror, by the whorls of your daughter, loaded with mysterious cargo and about to launch. I should also thank Margaret for arranging us in reverse alphabetical order. I really, really love reading first. And then I can sit down and drink my glass of wine and enjoy everybody else's. So the second poem I'm going to read is called Craving First Month. It's by Heidi Czerwiec. And an important thing to know about this poem is that she's an Ojibwe poet enrolled at Turtle Mountain. That's very much part of the experience of motherhood that she's telling here. Craving First Month. My belly rejected everything but a certain sky, the one that rocks the high north plains of my home. Nothing but color and light for my mouth, streaks of cirrus like pale lettuce, tear a leaf and taste that clear covering of clouds. I craved the prairie. Wild as Rapunzel's mother, I would have paid the witch's price, but my dear sister agreed to drive into the horizon, north and north for hours, the car skimming along the two-lane blacktop between acres of flooded field. We were a sea in the land that bred us. It fed us, and we were happy. The rush of passing color like fuel, waves of chartreuse, mustard weed lapping the ditches, confusing waves of sky grown on earth, flax blue as mirage. Then a doe, her blazing fawn springing ahead of us, red against the new crown of hard winter wheat. That's what I grew my son on, month one. I went hungry into the flat north toward the reservation. I ate it all. Even the dusty green of the little leaf sage that covers my grandparents' grave tasted good in my eyes. Here it is, I said to the wind up the bald hill. Here it is, I said to the question mark of child. Here's the land we are born from. Here's what made us. Here's the world that fed us. Here now, you eat too.
Thank you very much, Lesley. That was wonderful, and I want to congratulate you on your recent book and one that you're going to have in hand this summer, which is grand. I am lucky to get to introduce Athena Kildegard next, and I'm going to say something about Athena Kildegard that's a little extra because she is co-editor of this anthology. And Athena I learned from working with her a year and a half on this book together, that she has energy and integrity, a lot of joy in her work as a poet and work with other people in the community as a teacher. She's smart, and I loved working with her, and I just love her. And I think you're going to really enjoy her poem that she's going to read next. She's coming to us from Morris, Minnesota. She's the author of 5 books of poetry, most recently Course, from Tinderbox Editions. Athena.
Thank you, Margaret. The love, it's a big love, is mutual. And what a thrill to read after you, Lesley. I've known you for a few years and I've never read with you before, and may this be the first of many times. So I'll follow Lesley's lead and read my poem first. So also, let me just say to all of you out there listening in virtual world, we're so thrilled that you're here with us sharing the beautiful poetry tonight. So my poem is on page 22 if you have the book and you want to follow along. It's called Love Like Horses. This is a poem for my daughter, like Lesley's grown older than the daughter who is revealed in the poem. Love like horses. And when you wrote me a note, you were not even in school yet, to say you loved me more than horses, though you'd never spent even an hour in the company of a horse. I could not imagine how you could have formed this abstract love, this when you were too small to look into a mirror unless I held you up. And when you came to me when I was chopping peppers and celery years later, though not so much later that you'd left home, and you leaned toward me across our kitchen island and asked forthrightly, because that was the way you'd learned to find out what you needed to know. You asked me what an orgasm was like. It was then, looking at you as if for the first time again, a sharp knife in my hand, the crisp celestial scent of celery rising from the chopping block. It was then that I felt again the bliss of giving your cantering body to another, of opening completely, of letting your beautiful body run full out. And now I'll read a poem by Jen Gevin, a poet who lives in New Mexico. So that way we're stretching towards the south central part of the country. Jen's poem is on page 163. Miscarriage interpreted through animal science. After mating and laying her eggs, the octopus with a brain the size of a clementine goes senile. She welds herself into a cracked teapot she'd grown fond of, then dries up. Researchers find her yards from her tank, finally still after days of odd behavior. What size was her heart? That's not what we mean, of course, but the neurons in her arms as if each had its own brain. When cut, will regrow. When cut, will continue searching for food, then surrender prey to mouth as if the mouth were still attached, and still I lie on my side instead of my belly, pillow between my legs. This is more than phantom limb, as the octopus must know. What is it like to be an octopus? What I'm asking is how we carry on. Thank you.
Our next mother poet who is going to read her poem and one other is Hedy Habra. And Hedy's third collection of poetry, The Taste of the Earth, just won the 2019 Nautilus Silver Award and was finalist for the Best Book Award. She taught Spanish at Western Michigan University and lives in Kalamazoo, Michigan.
Thank you, Margaret and Athena, for putting together such a remarkable collection. It definitely represents so many different facets of motherhood. There are many, many gems there, and I chose to read a poem by Kalia Young. It's on page 116, for those of you who have the book. The poem is titled, At 4 years old, What She Said to Me. My daughter and I were climbing stairs. I was pulling her along. When she stopped, I stumbled. She said, You didn't let go. I said, I would never. Mama, if we die, she said, they will have to bury us together because we won't stop holding hands. They will put us in the same box. They will put me on top of you and I will become part of you again. Next, I'll read a poem, one of my poems, and it is titled To My Son Upon His First Visit to Lebanon. He wanted to see our summer house in the mountains of Abdat, enter the pictures where a young woman his age, her long hair flowing in the wind, guided his first steps on the terrace of the villa. He wanted to dream in a language never learned, see himself reflected in familiar faces, recapture smells and fragrances. He finally saw the orchard his father planted tree after tree, green and black figs, cherries, peaches, plums, pears, apples, and almonds. 100 fruit trees we would not see blossoming year after year. And the purple grape seeds from Japan, the miniature green seedless banati from Egypt, covering the trellis, tempting clusters hanging low, casting shadows on the shaded patio. The cut stone house with its tiled roof seemed out of place. Whatever happened to the one in the family album? No longer surrounded by green mountain slopes, nor an open view to the horizon. Erratic buildings sprouted like mushrooms during the Civil War. Concrete was biting the flanks of the mountains, spreading like a contagious disease. He rang the doorbell. The tenants were friendly, inviting him in. They said the previous owner was very proud of his orchard, that he himself had planted each one of these tall, imposing trees. He called us excited, said he wanted to buy the house back. We could spend summers there. Time regained, he thought, eager to relive our dream, retrieve its broken pieces. I tried to explain. What does belonging mean exactly? And does it really matter? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our poets in the book come from across the United States. You've heard from Lesley, who's from Virginia, and Hedy, who's from Michigan. And now we come home to Minnesota, where Noden Press happens to be located. And we're going to hear from Julie Gard. Julie Gard's prose poetry collection, Home Studies, was a finalist for the Minnesota Book Award. She teaches writing at the University of Wisconsin-Superior, and she lives in Duluth, Minnesota.
Well, good evening, and thank you so much, Athena and Margaret, for the opportunity to be part of this reading and this beautiful book. The first poem that I'm going to read is called Fractals, and it kind of deals with closeness and distance and touch, so maybe has some relevance during COVID-19 times or for any parent of a teenager. Fractals. Don't touch me, my daughter says half the time I reach out. The other half, she takes my hand, leans into me. The other half of the time, she's the one reaching for me. When she says, don't touch me, half of the time she's already sitting next to me with her left side pressed against my right. Half of the time she is across the room and I'm reading a book. She wants to know if it's a book about her. Then she's angry, if it is or if it's not. And then the second poem I'm going to read, and this is on page 185, if you wanted to follow along, is called Large Brass Key. And my partner and I met our daughter in Russia. And so this, I refer in this poem to a trip that we all took back together to Moscow and St. Petersburg. large brass key. The purpose of life is creation. The purpose is my daughter. At any moment, one can interrupt the other. She bursts into the room while I'm writing. My mind drifts to a poem in the middle of her sentence. My daughter is real in the kitchen. I can hear her making a sandwich, but this page is real in my study, like the key she found on a side street off Nevsky. I told her it opened Russia. Mom, stop, she said, but she brought it home. Now we share this one thing comfortably, the key that's in her room and in my mind.
Thank you very much. And now we all get to go to the West Coast and drop in on Rebecca Foust. Rebecca Faust's books include Paradise Drive from 2015, The Unexplored Ordnance Bin 2019, and Only, which is going to be forthcoming from Four Way Books in 2022. Faust works as a poetry editor for Women's Voices for Change and an assistant editor for Narrative. As I say, she's in Marin County, California. Rebecca.
Hi, everybody. Great to be here. Thank you for including me in this beautiful anthology. I'm so honored to be included in that and to be reading with all of you today. I think I'm going to start with Perseids. And this is in my new chapbook, The Unexploded Ordnance Bin. That's a reference to ordnance that you find on the beaches that has been dropped there during tests or whatever, and it hasn't exploded yet. And I think it's there actually is a bin for collecting it in Wellfleet, Massachusetts, and I think it's a great metaphor. But anyway, this poem is called Perseids, and the Perseids are meteorological phenomenon that happens every summer at the Cape. It's an asteroid shower, pretty amazing. Can you all hear me? Perseids. When the real star died and fell, I knew the others for tricks, trumpe d'oeil on the insides of eyelids. But it was no trick when that star larger than sky fell out of my sky, shock of arc, then black. My son has chest pains again. I thought we were past this. When he was a child, it was easy to hold his hand all night so he wouldn't die. Trace toxins in cereal, the new mole on his left little toe. I sang him back to sleep, and the next day he was off again, climbing branches I couldn't reach, or hunching all day over a fixed lens, knotting a fish line, fine as an eyelash. He collects horseshoe crab trash, knowing and naming each slender spire. Once I broke one and hid the pieces, but he missed it later, back to croon to his darlings, constellated in precise patterns in the sky on the floor of his bedroom. He's tall now, with a beard. The astral map is in pieces, just as real stars come unmoored and fall into flaming comets. Power fails, EKGs skip and stutter, MRIs hum, then blink off. Boys he knew in school come home from Iraq without legs. He trolls the internet for side effects of medicine taken to decrease the world's discomfort with him. Rarely fatal doesn't mean never, and what logic doesn't wet each day's edge with fear? I could die. I might die. We all die. I'll die. Maybe tonight, alone in his sleep. Don't get mad, Mom. We've done all the tests twice, but being alive means proving a negative. So how can we go on believing each day won't be the one that flames out? When he walks in his sleep, his eyes are open and dark, night terror pools. Shh. Now he's dropping off, worry lines etching his forehead, the shape of his mouth sucked into the neck of his t-shirt. Overhead stars arc across the dark sky, making small curved rips, and the light leaks out. So that was written during a really dark time. Things are better now. My son is 31 and living independently, although he did move back in with us during this confinement. He has Asperger's and he's doing great now. So this second poem is for my transgender daughter, and it's written in the form of a letter, and it's called Abeyance. Does anyone know what page it's on in the anthology, since I don't have that? Oh, well, it's there. Anyway, it's called Abeyance. I made soup tonight with cabbage, chard, and thyme picked outside our back door. For this moment, the room is warm and light, and I can presume you safe somewhere. I know the night lives inside you. I know grave, sad errors were made, dividing you and hiding you from you inside. I know a girl like you was knifed last week. Another set aflame. I know I lack the words, or all the words I say are wrong. I know I'll call and you won't answer, and still I'll call. I want to tell you, you are loved with all I have, recklessly and with abandon, loved the way the cabbage in my garden near inverts itself, splayed to catch each last ray of sun, and how the feeling furling in only makes the heart grow more dense and green. Tonight, it seems like something one could bear. Guess what? Dad and I finally figured out Pandora, and after all those years of silence, our old music fills the air. It fills the air, and somehow here, at this instant, and for this instant only, perhaps 3 bars, what I recall equals all I feel, and I remember all the words. Thank you.
Rebecca, how direct the gaze of those poems are at some difficult aspects of motherhood, and they're so tender. So really appreciate your reading them. You're writing them and you're reading them tonight. And now we go back to the East Coast, to Maryland, actually, and we get to hear from Teri Cross Davis, whose second collection, A More Perfect Union, won the 2019 journal Charles B. Wheeler Poetry Prize and will be published in February of 2021. She is a Cave Canem Fellow and the poetry coordinator for the Folger Shakespeare Library in Washington, D.C. She comes to us from her home in Silver Springs, Maryland.
Hello. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for the opportunity to present this work. Thank you so much to Margaret and to Athena for having my work in this incredible anthology. And thank you to our wonderful readers who've read ahead and those I've yet to hear. The first poem I'm reading is called Partus Sequitur Ventrum. And I'd like to dedicate this poem to the mothers of Sean Reed and to Ahmaud Arbery. This poem comes with an epigraph, or an epithang, as Miss Lucille Clifton liked to call them. And it reads, a Latin phrase that stands for the principle that the children of an enslaved woman are themselves born as slaves and owned by their mother's master. And that's in reference to the title, Partus Sequitur Ventrum. 1, morning. And this is on page 73 for those following along. 1, morning. His knobby 6-year-old knees, his anxious pace as if to keep step with the question's steady overflow. Is there a giant octopus in the Bermuda Triangle? How is paper made? How do fireworks know when to explode? No one told me Black boys could burn so bright. Wait, I am wrong. The dark sky has seen their fire snuffed by white hoods, malevolent blue eyes and bluer uniforms, white women's screams, all have been matched to their tender wood. So I hug my son tight, kiss the curl cropped so close it's straight. My mother eye insatiable. He is dessert and I'll always have seconds. Each morning I lick my thumb, clean him up good, wishing in vain the amniotic sac had dried to armor. 2, night. His lisp, loose, syrupy sweet, sneaks into my ear. Feel its heat, small source, more flicker than flame, flanked by arms still dreaming of muscle. He claims my squishy stomach the best pillow. If the security of our locked arms could extend beyond growth spurts, clocks, calendars, to the someone interviewing him, to the someone following him in the store, to the someone holding my son's life in trembling fingers poised above a phone's keypads, let my love be a note safety pinned to his chest. Send him back alive, unharmed. As a Black mother in America, I know my wells are birthright, pinned with iron, penned in ink. And the second poem I wanted to share is about my firstborn, my daughter, who's now 11, and my son, who's now 9, a lanky 9. So with that first child, we had to keep her in the bed. That was the only way to sleep. So this is called Family Bed. Her first tumult, roundhouse flip, little spark of flutter, little slip. When the universe tumbled through me, I plotted, heavy with importance, our path forward. Now she curls to me, the little C to the S curve of my breast, my nipple, a breath away from her needy lips. You say we must break her of sleeping with mommy, with daddy. You say 2 nights of no rest, of offering myself, is 2 nights too many, but she beckons. And when have I not heeded her call? This love radiates, burns brighter with each diminished night. I cannot relinquish her need. How tiring and lovely it is to feel. Thank you.
And thank you, Teri. You know, one of the interesting things for all of us when we're a part of an experience like this is that we get to peer into a room where people live. And with Teri, I don't think any Minnesotan could miss that we've got Prince over her left shoulder. Maybe she'll come on again and we'll get to see it. But our Prince, and but people all across the country loved him as well. And now we get Heidi letting us come into her life a little bit. It's one of the wonderful intimacies of this, even though we're so far apart. Heidi Czerwiec, our next reader, is an essayist and a poet whose most recent collection, Fluid States, won the Robert C. Jones Prize for Short Prose. She is joining us from Minneapolis, Minnesota. Heidi.
Thank you so much, Margaret and Athena, for the beautiful anthology, for organizing this. And thank you, Kris, for hosting. And thank all of you beautiful, beautiful readers. I'm so excited to be here. The first poem I'm going to read is called Fugue, Maternal Imagination. It's on page 45 for those of you following at home. Our son's birth mother chose fairly early on that she was going to choose adoption, and at about 17 weeks. And so she invited us to the 20-week ultrasound, and we got to be there for that. And at the same time, I was in the middle of a long project where I was researching monstrous births. So those two things kind of came together in this poem. Fugue, Maternal Imagination. And it has a, what was it, epithangy, as Teri put it. There are several things that cause monsters. Ambroise Paré on Monsters and Marvels, 1585. Paré detailed legs fused fast as fish, spines that bloom like split fruit, heads cleft or swelled. Wyatt to be, awash inside his sea of sound, sleeps on. Profound grief or shock that act upon the mother produce defect. In ultrasound, the screen may or may not a sequence of small tragedies unspool. The tech measures, double checks. It is a mercy of God, nature, when births are not misformed. A sequence of small genetic tragedies compounds, creates divine design or error. I've studied specimens. I know it's mercy when births are not misformed. Defects produced, downloaded, they float across my screen by grief. Paré blamed a mother's fancy. Mine? The birth mother's? What would her rape imprint? Wyatt to be, awash inside his sea? God hath a special hand in the womb. It was a shared mercy when Wyatt to be's mom chose me and when I chose to mother her son. All adoptions are a sequence of small tragedies. Profound grief or shock that act upon the mother produce defect. But which one? Would it be fancy to beg the tech for lead to shield him from the horrors in my head? For months, I've studied fearful symmetries, small tragedies who float in wombs, in jars, across a variety of screens. Wyatt to be is pronounced perfect, divine design or error. It is a mercy when births are not misformed, I sigh to the screen. Despite our tragedies, imagined and real, Wyatt to be, awash inside a sea of sound, exposes a perfect penis, then swims away and waves, or seems to, as if to say, God hath a special hand. What will he shape? And so hath Wyatt, waving at us all. And the second piece that I'll read tonight is a prose poem called Heat Stroked, that has another epithangy. I guess I have a thangy for them. I drowned in the fire of having you. I burned in the river of not having you. Robert Pinsky, Antique. Exhausted, I smell exhaust. Electrical scent of ozone, burnt meat, bonfire char. Small spasms in my migrained brain hallucinate a veritable catalog of flamed smells and smoke. I have to ask, do you smell that? I have to hunt a source outside my mind because what if? I never pass out from the pain of it, so I'm usually awake when the smells come. When the smells come in the middle of the night, when the family sleeps, I have to hunt even harder because what if? The middle of the night is a former flame. With an infant, I see too much of it. Wee hours, wee one, low lamps, and the allure of lit screens all make my migraines flare. When not to cries, I awake to ghosts of wood smoke and scorched plaster and shorted fuses. Either way, I lumber the halls because what if? What if? And what if it all burned? What if my son burnt up, burnt away? Would my unmothering life lie beneath, awaiting me to brush off ash? He cries in his crib, teething and febrile. I cry in my bed, migraining and feeble, pain that will not let me pass out, pain that smells pleasantly of mesquite. We cry, immolating and unconsumed. Child, you suck the air from me, yet I burn more brightly for it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Heidi. And thank you for inviting us into those poems and inviting us into wherever you are. It looks like perhaps a beautiful office. Maybe you write there. I don't know. Maybe you'll tell us later. But next we have Kate Bickham. Kate is the author of 2 books of poetry, both of them from LSU, Louisiana State University Press, Mouths Open to Name Her and The Belle Mar. Kate teaches creative writing at Bossier Parish Community College in Louisiana. Kate.
Hi, everybody. I'm going to read my poem from the beautiful anthology. I'm so excited to be in it. This poem originally appeared in my most recent book, Mouths Open to Name Her, which itself is all about motherhood and birth, mostly told in vignettes. So this poem is sort of specifically about the postpartum period, or if it can be said to exist, the moment when postpartum is over and you're back to being human. This poem is called At Last She Is Finished with Emptiness. After slow months of healing, night nursing, the breast pump, burying the old faithful dog, board meetings, cursing the monitor, the hurrying 3-minute showers and half-hour naps and instant breakfasts. Finally, her husband, who can wait no longer, leads her up the worn stairs to the sanctuary of rumpled bedding. He guides her mouth onto him, tilts her backwards, reopens her softly, a storm door creaking in sunlight after a long darkness. She hears the crack of a bat. A crowd cheers at the ballpark down the street. She imagines the sweating fans cheer for her, that the jays and robins herald her coming, that she is being urged, egged on by the whole waking universe. Yes. At last she is saying yes again, summering, ready again to belong to the boy and to the man. Afterwards, she tells him a year's worth of secrets. Then they hear the blankets rustle, a babble over the monitor. Sirens sing their songs from both sides to hold them there, to make them rise, promising such silence and noise and thirst and wetness, more than enough. Thank you.
She is saying yes again. Thank you very much for that poem, Katie. And now we have our ninth poet, our last reader for tonight, and that is, we come back in a lovely circle to Kris Bigalk, who is not only the host tonight through Normandale and the creative writing program there, she is the author of a poetry book, Enough, that was released in late 2019. She is, as I said before, the director of the creative writing program at Normandale Community College. And thank you, Kris, for being our host and for being also willing to read your poem and one other's for the group tonight. Kris.
Thank you so much, Margaret. Let's see, am I on the screen? Let me see. Okay, we're good. All right. This poem is from my first book called Repeat the Flesh in Numbers. And like Rebecca, I have a son on the spectrum, and this is a poem about when he was young. Aaron, 2 years old, playing at Orchard Park. It's on page 14. When the other mother's eyes leave their own children, stare at him, then at me. When their small talk carefully circles the questions they want to ask. What is wrong with him? How did it happen? I want to tell them how, when he was 1 day old, he stopped mid-breath, lips bluing. I touched his cheeks, puffing air against his sweet bowed mouth until he sighed against my ear, until his dusky skin turned pink again, and he agreed to stay, but not wholly. I want to tell them how I held hopes, at first flickering like fireflies in my cupped hands, a glance of light glinting now and then between my fingers. But when I opened my palms, their gray bodies curled up like withered prayers, dry as paper. I want to tell them how I wait for the cool May nights to come again this year, how I will take him out into the dew-flecked grass, the little sea glass green lights of fireflies glittering around our feet and knees, how this time I will catch my prayers delicately, only for a moment, then release them back to the lilac-scented cricket song night. How I will teach him to do the same. My second poem that I'm going to read is by my friend and fellow poet, Cullen Bailey Burns. Cullen used to live here in Minnesota, and now she lives out in California in the Bay Area. It's on page 55. We just want it to be healthy. Here is the little bomb. We call it baby, all mouth and potential. We do not speak of disappointments. No one to strap it on yet and cross the border, the demilitarized zone of our foyer. The neighbors coo at it, rub the tops of its dimpled hands and their thumbs and say, "Give me a smile." We think about schools and such, of course. But at night when we lay our plans, it always kicks its feet from the bassinet in the corner of the room, central to everything, central to some final detonation. Thank you so much to all of our readers. It's so great to be all in the same quote unquote room with you. I also want to thank you, Margaret, for putting together this amazing anthology. Just show it to everybody. Rocked by the Waters. And we'll have information on how you can purchase that book posted on Facebook afterwards as well. So I'm going to hand it back to Margaret, but those of you watching on Facebook, if you have questions you'd like to ask any of the poets, please go ahead and post them there on Facebook, and I will read them to the art right here on the screen. There's about a 20-second delay, so there might be a little bit of time that we wait, but we would love to answer any questions you have or any comments that you have, I'll relay to everybody. So thank you so much again for being here.
And right back to you, Kris, for managing this so well. We've all had some experiences with this online now, and you're very smooth at it, and we really appreciate it. I want to name again each of the poets who read tonight to say thank you for being part of the book and being part of this circle of reading tonight. First, we had Lesley Wheeler, Athena Kildegard, Hedy Habra, Julie Gard, Rebecca Faust, Teri Cross Davis, Heidi Czerwiec, Kate Bickham, and Kris Bigalk. All 9 of you just wonderful writers, and also, which is sometimes unusual, wonderful readers of your work out loud as well. I wanted to just say a couple of things about Rocked by the Waters, poems of motherhood. One of them is that we know that many people are looking for Mother's Day presents for the women in their lives, coming right around the corner on Sunday, and it would be a wonderful, wonderful gift, we feel. It's available in your local bookstores and other places where you pick up books. The book came about in part because Noden Press, the press that published this book, a couple of years ago was approached by 2 poets, both men, who proposed a book called Poems of Fatherhood. And Noden Press picked up that idea and ran with it. And that book came out a few years ago. And I thought it was terrific, read the book cover to cover, and thought, motherhood. We want a book of poems of all the various diverse voices and experiences that motherhood encompasses. And so Athena and I began working together after Noden Press accepted our idea of a proposal for a book on motherhood. And we got going a year and a half ago, and read hundreds and hundreds of poems to arrive at these choice 130 plus poems in the book. And we really bonded with each and every poem that had so much skill and so much passion and such interesting ideas and interesting situations. And we're very curious if people have questions to ask any of us about the book, individual poems, individual poets. And so, Kris, you'll have to guide me into figuring out whether we have any questions to respond to, or whether poets want to ask a question of one another. Is that legit?
Yeah, I've unmuted everyone. So if you want to speak, I would say kind of just give us a wave, and then Margaret, why don't you go ahead and give the okays? You know, we're mostly introverts, so I don't think we'll all try to talk at the same time, but who knows, right? So I'll keep an eye on Facebook, and if anybody wants to start out with a question, I would say go ahead and ask it. I'm still monitoring here.
I have a question.
Yes, Becky.
Did anybody else get grief from their kids? Does anyone else get grief from their kids for writing poems about them?
Mine's only 5, so he has no idea yet how much of his privacy I've invaded.
You better write fast.
I will say mine are, like I said, 9 and 11, and they know that I've written poems about them, and they get competitive about it. Because, you know,
There's that too.
the girl can't have more poems than the boy, and it gets into a big thing. So,
Yeah.
but they love it. They love it at this point.
Well, and my 2-year-old in that poem is now 15, and he's very proud of the fact that my best known poem is about him. He kind of lords it above his brothers a little.
Well, and that's the only time, or only the second time that I've read the ultrasound poem. The first time was in front of my son when the book that it's in came out, and I read it at
I love the penis part.
He hated that. He was so mad about that, and he's like, "You can't read that." So that's only the second time I've ever read it out loud. Although he doesn't mind me writing about him other than that, but that's apparently the line.
My daughter was 11 when my first book came out, and the first poem quoted her saying, "Sometimes I feel like a stream." And she demanded her own copy of the book, and she read it, and she said, "That's not what I said. I said, sometimes I feel like a dream, and all of this is just wrong." She's always been my best critic.
Well, my partner and I are both poets, and so our daughter kind of gets not just one, but 2 poetic perspectives sometimes, you know, on stages in her life, and she's an awfully good sport about it. She really is.
And actually, I want to mention that Julie Gard's partner also has a poem in this book. So that was a unique situation. And we also have a mother-daughter pair, poets who have a poem. Each one has a poem in the book, which is very cozy, I think, a lovely thing that happened.
Very cool.
And Athena, did you want to add anything about how the book came into being, or anything about the editing experience?
Well, when Margaret and I first started doing this, I sort of felt like we were plowing new ground, and we discovered that there are some other amazing and wonderful anthologies about motherhood out there. And now that we finished, I find myself reading poems about motherhood in all sorts of places, and I sort of feel like, oh, we've got a second volume here. But I do have to say, I think it's kind of remarkable that it wasn't that long ago that it was pretty hard for us to get poems of motherhood published in journals. It just wasn't a topic people felt like they wanted to hear about. And now I think the doors have really opened wide open for a really wide variety of voices about motherhood. And I think that's pretty exciting.
It's because all the editors are having babies now.
Because all the male poets started writing their poems about parenthood and publishing them, and then the women slipped in.
So there are a few more women editors than there used to be.
Yeah.
Yay.
That's right. That's right.
Were there a question for the editors? do you find certain topics related to motherhood that come up a lot in poems, and then certain topics that are sort of mysteriously underwritten?
Oh, that's a really good question, Lesley. Whether we had topics that were underwritten. I mean, I felt the range was quite astounding from poems of one poem wondering whether a woman's son, a poet's son, would be one who would in a fraternity be involved in harming a girl, a young woman, to joyous, just pure joyous. Here's that baby and it's in my arms. We had, the birthing, nursing, as you know, quite a number of poems about adoption, both like your poem, Julie, and Julie, do you directly name adoption in your poem? I know Heidi does. Julie, did you?
I think in my introduction I did, but I don't know that either of those poems directly mentions it. Yeah.
Athena, did you feel we had, that you've come across poems afterwards where they open some new content that we didn't have in the book?
Well, I have to think about that a minute, but I do have to say that Margaret, when we thought we had the whole book put together and we had spread it all out, and we realized we did not have any joyous conception poems,
right?
And so we ended up writing to all or maybe most of you to say, do you have any joyous concept, like, hey, it was so great making you.
That's offset all the oh shit conception poems.
Right. So I think that's kind of interesting. I mean, we have lots of poems that were like, rejoicing in the child in the world, but that conception thing, I think another place is adolescents and raising adolescents who are challenging is maybe an area that we haven't seen as many poems on. What do you think about that, Margaret?
I think that's true. And I also was looking at Katie's face just now and thinking about when we read her poems and realized that, the poem is extremely skillful, as you could all hear when she read it, but the content was also so interesting. We hadn't read any like that. Of one of the things that one gives up as a mother is sex for a while afterwards. I mean, a baby's made through sex, but then you have to give it up. And Katie's poem really knocked our socks off in terms of kind of, bringing up that topic and so directly. So I think we kept having more and more discoveries than feeling anything that was left out.
So I had also from Facebook, my student Amanda Judd wanted to know if you have were there any poems from the perspective of a godmother?
Well, we didn't, we specifically, although we received one actually as, a possibility, but we were really looking at, because we were really looking at motherhood. Although we do acknowledge that so many people are godparents and become very, very involved. And perhaps it was the poem, because had we another poem where we could have been convinced that the relationship was so intense and involved that it was a mothering relationship, we could have we would have looked at that, I think. Athena, does that sound like a okay description?
Yes.
But write that poem about godmotherhood if your daughter, or if you're the person who called in, your student wants to write that poem.
You got Simon, Amanda.
I'm gonna go write some conception poems since we're clearly missing those.
Go for it.
I'll be writing the adolescent poems.
You
Yeah,
know,
those are called dirges.
Urges.
saying that though, I mean, I was thinking about how, you know, I've probably written poems like that, and my son would actually be fine with me publishing them, but I think a lot of my friends, I can think of one in particular, a friend who had to stop writing about her kids because they just said, no way, you can't do that anymore.
Yeah, that's where I am now.
Yeah, and so that might be part of it too. Yeah.
Well, it's 8 o'clock, Kris, and we have a grand finale for people just visually, don't we, to close down? Are we ready
Like
to
the
say
poetic Brady Bunch.
goodbye to one another? And thank everybody for coming. We really appreciate those of you and all of you poets for coming and for reading, and Kris for hosting us, and Noden Press for publishing the
Well,
book.
thank you all for coming, and hopefully sometime you'll be able to come to campus and do this again. So thank you so much, everybody. And thank you, Margaret and Athena, for this beautiful, beautiful book. And we will be putting a link, like I said, to information on how to purchase it. Margaret, you'll have to send me where you want me to send them, and I'll put that up on the site. Thanks so much. Anybody want to say anything before we go?
I just
Thank
wanna say
you,
this is-
Kris.
This is the best
you,
reading
Margaret.
I've been in. Thank you for making it so wonderfully efficient and smooth.
And warm. Yeah, thank you.
And warm.
Thank you, all of you. All right. Good night, everybody.
Bye.
And Happy Mother's Day.
Happy Mother's Day.
Happy Mother's Day.